Early this morning, flight radars across northern Europe began registering anomalies, small, fast-moving objects hovering near restricted airspace. Within minutes, reports flooded in from Oslo, Copenhagen, and Rotterdam. Drones, dozens of them, moving in synchronized formations over commercial airports. Air traffic was halted, runways cleared, and emergency protocols quietly activated. Official statements spoke of precautionary safety measures. But inside NATO's command structure, the tone was different, urgent, calculated, and unusually coordinated. According to sources familiar with the incident, the drones were not random. Their altitude, flight patterns, and timing suggested surveillance, a probing maneuver designed to test reaction time and radar coverage across multiple member states. By midday, a classified assessment landed on desks in Brussels, warning that this was an orchestrated intrusion and a potential prelude to hybrid disruption. What happened next stunned even veteran observers. Denmark, normally restrained in its military posture, moved first. Within hours of the airspace violation, Danish naval patrols began boarding vessels suspected of belonging to the so-called Shadow Fleet, a loose network of tankers and cargo ships used to transport sanctioned goods under false flags. The first seizures took place quietly in the Baltic Sea, near the Kattegat Strait, but word spread fast. Maritime trackers showed multiple ships abruptly changing course or going dark, switching off transponders in an apparent attempt to disappear. Officially, Copenhagen described the operation as a routine inspection campaign. Yet, as European defense analysts quickly noted, the timing was too precise to be coincidence. The drone intrusions in the air and the seizures at sea appeared to be linked. Two fronts of the same invisible confrontation. Insiders now suggest that NATO intelligence may have anticipated the drone incursions and used them as a trigger for a pre-planned countermeasure. It wasn't a reaction, one security official told us. It was a signal. In this interpretation, the alliance deliberately turned a provocation into an opportunity, striking where the network behind those drones was most vulnerable, its financial and logistical arteries. For months, Western agencies have tracked the movements of shadow vessels carrying oil and sanctioned cargo, often under the cover of neutral ownership. Many of them operated near Denmark's jurisdictional waters, exploiting legal gray zones that allowed them to move freely. Today, that freedom appears to have ended. The implications extend far beyond maritime law. What's emerging looks like the first visible layer of a broader NATO campaign to dismantle the infrastructure sustaining Russia's wartime economy, not through declarations or sanctions, but through direct enforcement at sea. And if the drones were indeed part of a hostile reconnaissance effort, then this day marks the beginning of a new kind of deterrence, one where invisible incursions are met with immediate, visible retribution. Still, questions remain. Who controlled the drones, and what exactly did they seek to map? For now, officials remain silent, but the coordination between the skies and the sea is too precise to ignore. Something larger is unfolding, and today may be only the opening act. Stay with us, because in this story, every movement in the air could soon echo across the oceans. As the hours passed, the pattern became impossible to dismiss. Maritime intelligence trackers recorded a wave of unusual activity across the Baltic and North Seas, ships slowing, drifting, transmitting incomplete data, or suddenly vanishing from digital maps. These were not ordinary freighters. Most of them belonged to offshore shell companies registered through layers of legal fog in Liberia, Panama, and Cyprus. Their insurance records linked back to entities known among NATO analysts as the Shadow Logistics Web, a structure designed to disguise sanctioned cargo flows between Russian ports and global buyers. For months, these ships had operated undisturbed, protected by ambiguity and political hesitation. But after the morning's drone incidents, that hesitation evaporated. By midday, Danish patrol vessels, supported by reconnaissance aircraft, began conducting what observers described as targeted seizures. Official reports called them safety inspections, yet eyewitnesses noted heavily armed boarding teams and encrypted communications across multiple naval channels. According to sources familiar with NATO's Maritime Coordination Unit, these operations were neither spontaneous nor limited to Denmark. Intelligence shared from British and Dutch command posts suggested synchronized targeting, a multinational decision executed under the guise of local jurisdiction. This was pre-authorized, one senior defense analyst explained. The drones were the trigger, not the cause. Inside Brussels, a closed-door meeting of NATO security advisors confirmed the link between the airspace violations and the maritime response. Early assessments indicated that the drones were likely part of a reconnaissance effort meant to gauge civilian and military radar sensitivity, a digital rehearsal for potential disruption of logistics routes. If that was indeed the intent, the alliance's counter-response was meant to be unmistakable. Denmark's move sent a message. If you operate in the shadows, expect the light to find you. And, in a rare alignment of public and covert policy, the operation blended law enforcement with deterrence, seizing ships not through open confrontation, but through legal precision. However, behind the official confidence, unease was growing. Several European diplomats privately admitted that the escalation risk was higher than publicly acknowledged. Shadow fleets are not merely economic tools. They often carry intelligence hardware, dual-use cargo, or communications nodes used for covert coordination. Seizing such assets could provoke retaliation, not through open conflict, but through cyber disruption or sabotage of critical infrastructure. Already, some airport networks in Scandinavia reported interference with air traffic data following the morning drone incursions. Officials called it an unrelated technical glitch. Experts were less certain. Meanwhile, international shipping markets reacted instantly. Freight rates through northern corridors surged. Insurance premiums on unverified cargo doubled within hours. Traders began diverting routes south toward the English Channel and Mediterranean, fearing that what began in the Baltic might expand across Europe's northern waters. Analysts describe this as a new form of hybrid sanction, where enforcement happens physically, not on paper. It's a method that bypasses diplomacy entirely, striking the flow of money and material in real time. Still, the question lingers. Who precisely was NATO responding to? No actor has claimed responsibility for the drone swarm, and the devices recovered show no clear origin. Yet insiders suggest that the operation's precision hints at state-level coordination, or at least state-level access to intelligence. The quiet consensus among those who follow these patterns is that this was a test, and NATO's response, the instant maritime crackdown, was not just a reaction, but a rehearsal. The message is clear. In this new phase of confrontation, every invisible act will have a visible consequence. But beneath that message lies a deeper uncertainty. How far the alliance is willing to push before the shadow war turns into something that can no longer remain unseen. By early afternoon, the situation took a sharper, almost theatrical turn. Satellite imagery released by independent analysts showed at least 4 detained vessels anchored under Danish naval escort near the entrance to the Skagerrak Strait. From above, they looked ordinary, rusting tankers with faded hulls and mismatched flags. But closer inspection revealed something that startled even experienced maritime observers. Sections of their communication arrays had been deliberately dismantled before interception, as if someone aboard tried to erase digital fingerprints moments before capture. This detail transformed what appeared to be a regulatory operation into something far more deliberate. In intelligence circles, the term quietly circulating was controlled exposure, a tactic used when one side wants to reveal another's covert infrastructure without sparking open conflict. Inside NATO's coordination centers, activity intensified. According to sources familiar with the matter, intercepted communications indicated that several remaining vessels in the Shadow network had abruptly changed direction, heading toward neutral harbors under false destinations. Some even attempted to broadcast distress signals, a common trick to deter interception. Yet the response from Copenhagen was immediate and unyielding. Danish authorities refused port entry to any ship lacking verified documentation, effectively freezing dozens of tankers mid-route. For those watching closely, this was more than enforcement. It was a blockade in all but name. It's subtle, legalistic, but it's still a form of containment, remarked one maritime policy expert. They've drawn a line on the map without declaring it. Meanwhile, investigators examining the seized ships began discovering irregularities that went far beyond sanctions evasion. Leaked inspection reports, later confirmed by security analysts, mentioned unauthorized data transmitters hidden inside cargo compartments, devices capable of long-range encrypted communication. Their purpose remains unconfirmed, but defense officials suspect they were used for offshore signal relay or navigation interference. If proven true, it would mean the Shadow Fleet wasn't just moving goods, it was gathering intelligence. That possibility reframes everything. The drones over Europe's airports this morning might not have been surveillance for sabotage, but part of a much broader mapping network linking airspace and maritime corridors into one operational system. What makes this revelation more alarming is the coordination timeline. Within less than 12 hours, NATO moved from detection to response, a speed unheard of in bureaucratic Europe. This suggests pre-positioned intelligence, pre-approved contingency plans, and a clear understanding of what to expect. No one improvises at that level, one senior European defense advisor noted. This was waiting to happen. The implication is that the alliance may have been tracking the network for weeks, possibly months, waiting for the right moment to act. The drones provided both the justification and the trigger. And yet, the more precise the operation appears, the deeper the uncertainty grows. If the drones and the ships were connected, it means someone wanted this exposure to occur, that the incident was not just a probe, but bait. The notion unsettles even seasoned analysts. Was NATO's swift retaliation a calculated success, or did it play into a broader strategy designed to test its readiness? Inside Brussels, that question now dominates private conversations. The official narrative remains calm. Routine inspections, localized security measures. But behind that facade, a sense of unease spreads through diplomatic channels. Something about the symmetry of today's events, air and sea, visibility and silence, feels too exact to be coincidence. At this stage, the focus has shifted from what NATO did to what comes next. Intelligence reports warn that several states may respond asymmetrically, not through military means, but by targeting communication networks or port infrastructure in retaliation. Already, 2 major European data relays experienced brief outages in the evening hours, officially blamed on weather interference. Analysts, however, are unconvinced. In an era where information flows are as strategic as oil, these patterns rarely align by chance. The unseen conflict continues to unfold beneath the surface, and insiders admit privately that today's operations may only have exposed one layer of a much larger game. The next move, they say, will not come from the sea, but from the network that binds it all together. As the day stretched into its tense second half, what had begun as a localized disruption transformed into a full-scale security operation spanning multiple NATO jurisdictions. Danish naval activity intensified, joined quietly by British and Dutch reconnaissance craft sweeping the North Sea in tight, overlapping arcs. Officially, the mission remained monitoring of maritime safety zones. In practice, it was something closer to a live exercise in hybrid deterrence, the kind of operation that happens when alliances prepare for confrontation without naming an enemy. Inside classified coordination channels, intelligence officers described synchronized movement patterns among several unregistered vessels still active in the Baltic. Some were reported shadowing NATO patrol routes at low speed, transmitting fragmented transponder signals that mimicked commercial codes. It was, as one insider phrased it, a conversation in motion, a test of reaction, endurance, and intent. Meanwhile, the political reverberations spread swiftly through European capitals. In Berlin, diplomats warned privately that Denmark's unilateral seizures could trigger economic backlash if proven excessive. In Paris, defense analysts praised the operation as a long-overdue demonstration of resolve. And in Brussels, the tone remained cautious but firm. A senior NATO official, speaking off-record, summarized the alliance's view bluntly. When unidentified drones scan our skies and sanctioned ships hide in our seas, neutrality ceases to exist. That phrase, circulating later among journalists and military commentators, captured the mood of the day, restrained yet unmistakably defiant. What began to unsettle observers, however, was the growing evidence that this confrontation was not purely external. According to leaked intercepts reviewed by analysts, some of the vessels caught in Danish waters were linked to shell companies incorporated within EU jurisdictions themselves, a revelation that hints at a web of complicity stretching far beyond Russian control. In essence, Europe may have been unknowingly enabling the very logistics it now seeks to dismantle. It's not just about sanctions evasion, one maritime economist noted. It's about how the global energy trade adapts when transparency becomes a threat. The seizures, therefore, risk exposing uncomfortable truths, that the shadow fleet's existence depended not only on Moscow's ingenuity, but also on Western blind spots. At the same time, defense specialists noted strange fluctuations in radio and satellite traffic along the northern corridor. Encrypted bands used for military coordination were briefly jammed, forcing communications to reroute through secondary channels. NATO described it as temporary interference. But inside cybersecurity units, a different phrase was used: signal retaliation. It suggested that someone, somewhere, was responding in kind, probing for weaknesses, just as the alliance was asserting its strength. The coincidence between those disruptions and the naval seizures was too precise to ignore. Hybrid warfare, as several analysts pointed out, doesn't require explosions. It thrives on confusion. In Copenhagen, the official stance hardened. The government reiterated its right and responsibility to defend the integrity of maritime trade routes, while quietly expanding security perimeters around critical ports. armed patrols began escorting supply convoys, a measure unseen since the height of Cold War tensions. Yet, the narrative presented to the public remained calm, even routine. No mention of drones, no mention of retaliation, just the language of law, safety, and operational adjustments. But beneath that linguistic surface, everyone involved understood the stakes. NATO's credibility had been drawn into the open, not through treaties or declarations, but through real-time enforcement at sea. And if even one detained vessel carried something more than oil, sensitive electronics, encrypted data modules, or classified cargo, the implications would ripple far beyond the Baltic. By this point, observers recognized that the alliance had crossed an invisible threshold. The drones had tested Europe's airspace. Denmark's response had tested its will. And now, what was once a shadow conflict had begun to take form. Still silent, still deniable, but no longer hypothetical. The question no one yet dares to ask aloud lingers in the air. If this was merely the first move, what happens when the next one doesn't come from the sky or the sea, but from somewhere even harder to detect? The answer, for now, remains unspoken. But the preparations are already underway. By evening, a strange calm settled over northern Europe. Air traffic gradually resumed, ships adjusted course, and official statements began framing the day's events as contained. But those inside the system knew better. This was not resolution, it was a pause. A carefully managed silence designed to prevent escalation while concealing how close the situation had come to spiraling beyond control. In Copenhagen, the Defense Ministry released a brief statement reaffirming Denmark's commitment to maritime transparency. Yet behind those measured words, intelligence officers were still reviewing encrypted transmissions recovered from the detained vessels. According to early findings, several of the seized ships had carried data storage units hidden deep within ballast compartments, devices now being analyzed under NATO supervision. What's on them remains classified, but multiple sources describe the content as strategically significant. That phrase, in diplomatic language, rarely appears by accident. Across Brussels, the mood was equally restrained. Officials praised Denmark's swift and responsible action, while quietly instructing member states to heighten electronic surveillance across northern corridors. Unofficially, the alliance's internal briefings now describe the Baltic and North Seas as zones of hybrid exposure. The terminology is telling. It implies not active warfare, but permanent vulnerability. In this environment, deterrence no longer means tanks or air patrols. It means information dominance, the ability to see what the adversary hides and strike before it's visible. Today's events, according to several defense experts, mark the first time NATO has exercised that doctrine in real time. A drone swarm above airports triggered a maritime crackdown within hours. A choreography that no one publicly acknowledges, but everyone understands. Markets reacted quickly. Freight insurers raised premiums for ships operating under opaque ownership, while several major trading firms quietly suspended routes through the Baltic until risk assessments are updated. In financial terms, NATO's enforcement achieved what months of sanctions could not: a sudden paralysis of the Shadow Fleet's logistics. But in geopolitical terms, the victory feels fragile. Analysts warn that retaliation may come in less visible forms: cyber interference, satellite disruptions, or even disinformation campaigns targeting the alliance's credibility. Already, social media networks are flooded with conflicting narratives: fabricated videos, falsified coordinates, anonymous claims of Western provocation. The battle for perception has begun, as real and consequential as any confrontation at sea. Still, among defense insiders, a different unease prevails. The precision of the morning's drone incursions, the timing of NATO's response, and the sophistication of the captured technology suggest that both sides are operating on a level of coordination far beyond what the public sees. This isn't escalation, one intelligence source remarked. It's rehearsal. That word hangs heavily, because rehearsals imply continuation, not conclusion. The incident over northern skies may fade from headlines, but its implications will shape every strategic decision in the months to come. The message has been sent, but so has the counter-message. Each side now knows how fast the other can move, how far it's willing to go, and what silence truly means. For ordinary Europeans, life will resume tomorrow as if nothing happened. Flights will depart, cargo will move, and television news will turn to other stories. But beneath that veneer of normality, the rhythm of deterrence continues, unseen, unspoken, relentless. The drones that appeared above airports were not weapons. They were mirrors, reflecting the new face of modern confrontation. NATO's instant reply, Denmark's quiet surgical enforcement, showed that the alliance has entered a new era, one defined not by declarations, but by actions that unfold faster than explanations can follow. And somewhere, in the gray intersection between air and sea, the next signal is already forming. Whether it rises from the clouds or emerges from the depths, it will carry the same message, that the shadows of modern warfare are no longer invisible. For those watching closely, this was not the end of a story, but the moment it began. Stay alert, stay informed, because today's silence is only the calm before the next movement.